Howdy, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for being here today. It's good to finally get this train back on the tracks. Welcome to episode 18 of Anomalous America, Indiana. It's been a long time. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Just make sure, let me check. Make sure I'm actually live. I've done this before. All right. How's everybody doing? Well, like I said, couldn't figure out whether we were going to do an early show or a later show. And, I wasn't even sure I was going to be able to get this up and running. Uh, Life is complex. But here we are. And I'm going to do my best to keep this ball rolling. Baby is asleep right outside my door. So I will take a break at some point when he wakes up to take him downstairs. Just a heads up to that. But it's worth it to get this all going again. I've got so much material backed up that yeah, it's kind of daunting, honestly. And you think I would have made it easy on myself and just had everything kind of laid out and saved in one specific place, so I would have been able to come back. But no, but that was good. It was a good. It was good. I found some material that I hadn't sorted through yet, and added some fresh things. For those who don't know, I try. I don't always do it, but I try to put a thread together on Twitter where you can kind of follow along, see some of my older posts, and read more of the material. I'll have that in the description below. But that's what we'll jump into, just because I kind of start all these episodes off that way because I've been sharing stuff on there for so many years that it's nice to go back and reread stuff and see stuff that I haven't looked at in years. And that's kind of this whole process, and then finding new things. 1:30 in the morning. Yeah, Stellium, good to see you. Bye. Go to bed. So yeah, like I said, we'll jump into some shares here. Do a quick little peruse through chat. Robert, good to see you. Sherry, thank you for being here. I haven't seen you in a long time. I haven't seen any of you. Jen, good to see you. Jack, welcome. Fo 888. Phono 888. Welcome. Bud K. Greetings. The British Tartarian. Thanks for being here. Gary. Andy. Lewis. Suzuki. Welcome. 808 Venti. Uncle Dr. G. Everybody. Appreciate you guys. Trying to get this channel back up and going again, and nothing's really been organized. Posted a few videos. Perhaps I'll go back in really quick and I'll just share some of those. For those that haven't seen it or aren't aware, that I've posted some new videos. The Chinese, the ancient first settlers of America. Really enjoyed that video. It talks about how not only the first layer and second layer of civilizations and buried ruins and things like that are slowly making their way to the kind of forefront, especially, again, in this kind of mud flood Tartaria stuff. But as this author pointed out in 1912, there are 3, if not 4, sometimes 5 buried civilizations below our very feet. And it's easy to get caught up looking at pyramids and Mayan ruins and things that we maybe find a story or two below ground. But just imagine. And I felt like it was a perfect video to kind of get everything back and running again. Through probably the first 6 or 7 episodes of Anomalous America, that was kind of the theme. That not only were we looking at plants and animals beyond kind of description, Again, that megafauna, giants, not only humans, but animals, mammals, reptiles, but showing that they are much closer to the surface than we've been led to believe. Aztec Bible stories, again, kind of an overlap with that. As I've stated in some of these videos, I'm still kind of connecting the dots, at least presenting information along the lines of Queen Mu. I have a pretty well organized playlist here, and but yeah, let's get into the material. Stop wasting time. We're gonna jump right into my Twitter thread and just kind of read through some posts I've made over the years, and then as you can see at the top here, let's get rid of my face, huh? Maybe we'll keep it. As you can see at the top here, these are all the PDFs, not including what I have on my Twitter. So these are some full page articles, which again I won't be due to time restraints and saving your own patience. Not everyone can sit through me reading an entire article, nor myself. Some of these full page and some of them not. Um, Covering the gamut from lost civilizations to mound builders to caverns to hidden tombs, all kinds of stuff. You know, kind of in my wheelhouse as far as Anomalous America goes. No, anytime. Thanks for being here. Where did the Bible originate? Yeah, exactly. Where did the Bible originate? Yeah, and I'm kind of laying the groundwork for future conversations. And you know, the idea of where to start when it comes to history is that there's no, everyone's going to have a different opinion, and that goes without saying. But people get real sensitive and touchy when it comes to someone presenting their own ideas or someone else's ideas, because predominantly that's what my channel is focused on, is sharing other people's not only discoveries and opinions and ideas and all these things, and that shouldn't hurt your feelings. And just like anything else on YouTube, there's hundreds of thousands of things to click on. And if I don't keep your attention or I hurt your feelings, you're more than welcome to move along. And I just want to draw people that are kind of magnetized to this type of information and my way of presenting. I'm not some big production, and I'm not trying to put out some TV quality production. This is supposed to be organic and rusty and honest. Whatever level of honesty that you get from it is a blessing to me, and I'm just happy you're here ultimately. So anyways, we're going to do a quick little look at maps, some images. I just threw this up today just so I could kind of refresh my mind. Nothing crazy, all stuff that is available. This is Fort Wayne. I tend to like to focus on some of these images down here. Again, I'll share the description here, but um, this bird's eye view was done in 1868. And, even Fort Wayne had some pretty incredible buildings, pretty advanced buildings. Peru, which is quite an interesting name for a town, but you find so many overlays with American cities. Richmond, obviously one of the most populous cities in Indiana, behind Indianapolis in this time frame. Pretty beautiful architecture, very industry driven town. And Evansville, I've shared many more of these, probably a dozen more of these that I've shared, but for the sake of time, again, yeah, it's really interesting. And for those of you that aren't too well versed in this idea, there's there's prisons and there's insane asylums that, no matter what city they're in, they often tend to be the largest and most advanced buildings in the city, which is a red flag. These are some great black and whites of Indianapolis and like early 1900s, 1908, 1907, something around there. Indianapolis used to be an ancient highway, and tribes, natives, aborigines, whatever terms Indians you prefer to use, um, would collectively meet in this region. And this is a monument that was erected, um, that lays out this kind of crossroads. Um, and there's kind of a sinister background to this monument and the statues and the symbology on this monument. Maybe someday I'll just do a video on that by itself because it would be quite a lengthy description. But I've done a lot of material on fountains and streams and what the symbology of, the kind of the gathering hole, so to say. Not only that, the four pillars and the symbology here of our realm, Mount Meru. Um, yeah, it's very very symbolic. This area here, and the Imperial is a hotel. The obvious giveaways here: half of a floor completely buried, though you can still see the actual parts of the window that lift up, and that's like all of Indianapolis. But like many of our hometowns, mine, Portland especially, like look at all these windows. You can just see about 6 inches of them. And then you got the basement that goes down here. Just some interesting photos, trying to share them all. This is from 1834. This is the state capitol building. The main thing that always stood out to me was how much of this looks like a basketball court. And I've joked around that, even though it goes without saying, that the language used in our modern day justice system is very much reminiscent of a sport, of a game. You're playing a game. And this goes back to some of my older posts about ball courts and how the not only the Mayan, and again Aztec and these kind of overlapping names, like differentiating between these two different civilizations, three or four, five or six, right? And how they use the ball court to settle disputes, and how the kind of justice system and the court of law and all of these things have slowly morphed from these kind of games where they would handle things and there would be a judge and blah blah blah. And that it's no coincidence that I think a football field and a baseball court, or a baseball field and a basketball court, looks very much like a government building. And then we're going to jump right into material. So real quick before I start reading, I'll just kind of go through again here. Lucy Rose, thanks for joining me. CRV Walks. Whenever you think the word is symbology, it's almost 100% of the time actually symbolism. Whenever you think the word is symbology, I'm not quite sure what symbol. I'm not quite sure what you're saying there. Love your work. Thank you for your time. Thanks, Doug. Thanks for being here. Always wondered who was all this for. Yeah. Great question. A lot of people have an idea, but it's certainly hard to say for certain what came before us, and then what came before them, and then what came before them, and them, and them, and them. 3, 4, 5. I have a lot of buried civilizations. I think I did a video on Darius, something like that. And it was the same thing. Three layers of ruins. Hamilton, Ohio, Ontario has an ornate old asylum, as it were, on the edge of Niagara. Yeah, they're all over the realm. Unfortunately, my Oregon episode, I touch on one of them. It was the biggest building in Oregon in the 1800s, of course, and it was an asylum, and the things that they were putting people away for was pretty ridiculous. The one on 1908 looks like it was added after the fact. Highway of America, yes. Crossroads, yeah, yep. Indianapolis, Indian, but it makes you think. Big red flag, true. I found out recently that there are some amazing historical sites and artifacts all over Indiana and Iowa. Yeah, all over the realm, Jack. The whole place is covered. You know, even the most desolate regions and the desert barren regions of America, especially America's Southwest, often hide the most. Interesting, they paved over most of the main railroads. Yep. You know, what's funny is that I had an article I shared a long time ago that talked about how they noticed weather pattern changes when they were building railroads, and this kind of idea of telluric currents, and that when you look at a city that, you know, again, I do attach a lot of kind of the hermetic as above, so below, as within, so without concepts to everything in this realm exists within us, you know, and that there's always a micro macro um, explanation to things. And when you look at cities, you can not only look up to a celestial, larger, a kind of etheric representation of that city, but look within and see more of a micro example of that within you. And, you know, railroads, roads, blood vessels, you know, pig iron, you know, and the idea of these kind of mechanistic industrial ages and what iron is representative of. And you think of the blacksmith and Vulcan, and not only that, but volcanism itself and what is lava. You know, it's just rolling iron, mm, life force, right? Magma rolls through an area and devastates things, but then is the most beautiful, fertile kind of jumpstart for life to regrow. And I was driving my oldest son to school today, and you know, he goes to school. He, his school's pretty far away, and they had just clear cutted, not clear cutted, but a farmer had taken out what little bit of old growth he had on the corner of his property, and it's like a 2 month long process, tearing all these logs down, getting all the debris that's not worth going to the mill, and stacking those into piles and burning them down. And I was telling, he's like, I can't believe how long it takes just to open up, you know, 4 or 5, 6 acres of land. And I said, yeah, it's pretty funny, but you know, in 25, 35, 50, 100 years, every one of these fields that these farmers had to work so hard to clear to make room for land, you know, to grow, would be completely covered up and taken over by nature again. But that's enough rambling. Let's get into some articles again. A wonderful discovery, Missouri, 1879. And again, for those of you that may be new to these, to my presentations, here's your title. Missouri is the state of the publication. Often that's something that people have uh, not understood about. Well, I'm posting a title of a state that doesn't belong with Indiana, but that's how it works. So, you know, half of my articles come from articles from out of state. Discovery of a cavern cut in solid rock. Among the most remarkable discoveries, and then this is just a quick little synopsis, and then I'll read the whole article. Lost his hold and fell 15 feet. Walls adorned with the most vividly colored drawings of men and animals. The ceiling was domed. On yesterday, an old gentleman by the name of Saucery, living about 8 miles southeast of here in that section known as Chimney Pierre Hills. The name was derived from an ancient pier or pillar of stone, now partly destroyed, about 15 feet high, shaped like a chimney, and having a sunken square in the base as though designed for a fireplace, supposed by many to be a relic of those wonderful prehistoric people, the mound builders. Now, on an interesting note, they find these kind of petrified, in a way, so to say, petrified chimneys all over the realm, and they connect with buried buildings underground. So to say that, you know, they said it was like a chimney. I'm sure it was a square base. The mound builders came to the city and detailed their wonderful discovery of a cavern cut in the solid rock or bluff, which, if anything like represented, will take its place among the most remarkable and wonderful of archaeological discoveries. As we learn the story, Mr. Saucery, sorry, started out early this morning to seek a sheep which had strayed away from the flock he was penning for the purpose of shearing. Following along the hazels, skirting an immense table of rock known from the first settlement of the country as Chimney Pier, he heard the faint bleating of his sheep, apparently from behind a great standing splinter torn from the mass, probably by a thunderbolt, and detached until a broad fissure parted the two. Thinking the animal had become entangled in this fissure, he sought to slip some inside, and the fragment, apologies, they're torn here, next to the precipice of bluff when he lost his hold and fell some 15 feet, aligning temporarily on the edge of a smooth, flat stone, concealed in a dense undergrowth. Judge of his alarm as he found this platform under his feet slowly swinging like a trapdoor, letting him down in the depths of the earth. The shock of the fall was such as to deprive him of all power to catch and save himself. In a few seconds, he found himself in a vestibule cut out of the solid rock, and the walls of which were adorned with the most vividly colored drawings of men and animals. The ceiling, which was dome shaped and about 11 feet above the floor, was adorned with the figure of a giant sized man placing faggots in a figure designed to represent the sun. The sides bore, in black and brown colors, delineations of animals he says he never saw, even pictured, huge tusked and trunked beasts like elephants, with masses of shaggy hair falling about their heads and shoulders. Great cats, he says, striped like tigers and with tusks hanging over their lips like walruses. In the midst of this throng of wild beasts, upon a yellow background, is delineated the form of a man seated in some kind of a vehicle, much like Mr. Saucer's description, an ancient Roman chariot. The whole of these paintings bear inscriptions, which of course Mr. Saucer could not read. On one facade of this prehistoric temple, the unknown artist had depicted birds and fowls, curious and gorgeous, score after score of them, says Mr. Saucer, none of which he could recognize as now common to this country. The colors he described as peculiarly and charmingly bright. The surrounding country is rich with relics of this curious and unknown race, and throughout the country are many evidences of the advanced condition of civilization they had attained. David, welcome. Thanks for becoming a member. I appreciate it. So yeah, falls into a tomb of sorts, carved out of the rock, domed ceilings, a painted man aligning some sticks in the shape of the sun, saber-toothed tigers, giant mammoths, and birds of bright color. You know, whether or not we're dealing with tropical types of animals or birds, who knows? Perhaps this is the burial place or meant to be the tomb, and these are the kind of depictions. But nonetheless, pretty crazy. Subterranean discovery, 1858. During the excavation of a street in Evansville, Indiana, the workmen came across the remains of a cabin 18 feet below the surface of the earth. Now, again, why I recommended going back through my channel and maybe checking out some of my older videos. In Ancient Buried Races of the Americas, he gives quite a great description of what's on top of these buried civilizations. And the vegetation and the kind of earth that's left over is quite different in each layer. But it varied anywhere from 11 to 18 feet. So, and I've shown in several of my articles that we go as far down as 300 feet and find whole cities, right? Missouri, we went down 300 feet. Kentucky, we went down 100 feet. In Kentucky, they went down 1,200 feet and found a frozen ocean full of icebergs, whales and sharks with no eyes, all kinds of stuff. I mean, down and down and down we go. Um, at the bottom of coal shafts, they find all kinds of stuff, mines, on and on and on. So 18 feet, there's your like second civilization, right? Possibly even third, but I'd like to say that, you take a house 8 to 10 feet tall, bury it in 18 feet, right? So, anyways, this wonderful subterranean house was about 12 feet in length, formed upright posts set in the ground, and boarded up with split oak puncheons secured by wooden pins. The posts and pins were partially decayed, but still stuck together. Within the wall were found portions of an old fashioned spinning wheel, a wooden maul, several pairs of boots and shoes, and the identical charred stick which the former occupants of the house had used to punch the fire with. Again, 1858. And that's one of 100, at least, that I've shown over the years of just a subterranean house, where there are places where they find dozens of chimneys sticking out of the ground. Virginia sticks out as one of them that I found. I know Ohio's the same way. I posted one in Santa Cruz, California, where they're exploring mid 1800s, and they're like, look at all these rocks that look like chimneys sticking out of the ground. Oh, they are chimneys. Oh, and they find a buried city, at the end of those chimneys. Several houses, a dozen houses, a city, who knows? This one's incredibly interesting. I meant to share this on a different show and completely forgot about it. This one is 10 Yards of Snake, South Carolina, 1893. The monster does seem startling things on the Western Farm. If you should ever pass the Western Farm near Delphi, Indiana, said John Gilbert to a New York Sun man, you couldn't help but notice a shepherd dog lying on one end of the front porch with his head on his four paws, apparently asleep. He went to sleep, according to the story that Farmer Weston tells, one night in February last, and he has never awakened since. When that dog went to sleep, he weighed about 50 pounds. He now weighs more than 150 pounds, for he is petrified. Some folks declare that he is simply a dog carved from stone, but that is before they have heard Farmer Weston's story. After they hear that, they have nothing more to say. They can't say anything. They simply marvel. Farmer Weston is a member of the Baptist Church and only has one arm, so it is hardly likely that he would lie about a little thing like a petrified shepherd dog. And more than that, the change in the dog's status is really not the most surprising thing about the farmer's story. I was never any nearer the Weston farm than Richmond, Indiana, and consequently I never saw the dog, but a man who saw it not long ago told me the story of Farmer Weston told him about the dog and the amazing manner in which it was petrified. Just after dark one night, this is a really crazy story about an electrical phenomenon, so just bear with me here. Just one night, early in February, the farmer left the house, he said, to go to his barn to attend to his horses for the night. The weather was cold, but there was no wind to stir, so the farmer was surprised to hear a noise like the soughing of heavy wind through the branches of the trees. This sound was all the more surprising because there was no trees anywhere around for the wind to sough in. A public road passes the house 100 yards or so distant, and the noise seemed to be from the direction of the road. Farmer Weston stopped and listened to the singular noise, and he listened. Then he saw a sight no Hoosier farmer ever gazed on before, and he says he is willing to bet his farm on it. And what do you think it was? Said the man. Who said that he was saying just what Farmer Weston had said to him? A snake. Not only a snake, but a fire. Regular fiery serpent came suddenly from the road and wound, wiggled, and zigzagged its way towards Weston, traveling as fast as a steam engine. According to the farmer's data, this fiery snake was 30 feet long and a foot and a half in diameter. Now, naturally, one would suppose that a snake carrying as much fire as that along with it would quickly raise the temperature of the weather in any district it was traveling through. But things worked just to the contrary with the snake. As it approached Farmer Weston, he could feel the temperature getting rapidly lower until he was sure it fell way below zero. This alarmed the farmer, for he hadn't things just fixed around the premise for such a sudden and unprecedented change in weather. Although the fiery serpent was coming right at him, accompanied by the soughing noise he had heard, Farmer Weston did not move from his tracks. But the snake suddenly changed its course when it had come within 20 feet of him and made directly for the barn. As the snake turned from its course, the sound that was traveling with it changed and became exactly such a noise as made by a steam gong. At the same instant, Weston felt a sharp electric shock, and he was unable to move a muscle or utter a sound. He was like one paralyzed. The snake made straight for the barn, climbed right up the side of the building to the roof, and for 5 minutes contorted itself in fiery gyrations all around the outside of the barn. Weston expected every second to see the building burst into flames, but nothing of the kind occurred. At last, the fiery serpent climbed to the peak of the roof and raised up one end of itself perpendicularly in the air, where it swayed and whirled for a minute or more. When there came a sound like the report of a distant cannon, and the startling exhibition was at an end. The fiery serpent disappeared as if it had never been. With the report that doused the glim of the snake, so to speak, Farmer Weston felt another strong electric shock, but it seemed to come as an antidote to the first one, for he instantly recovered the use of his limbs and his voice. The temperature of the weather instantly rose again, and stood where it was before the strange fire of the snake had sent it down. The first thing Farmer Weston did was to go back to the house and confide to his wife what he had seen. She was inclined to pooh-pooh him, but at last accompanied him to the barn with a lantern. They were confronted with startling surprises. The first was the effect the fiery serpent's sport had on the barn. The building was covered with what seemed to be a network of icy ropes, evidently marking where the snake had flashed about on around and over the barn. But the network wasn't ice. So far from it that a lighted candle held against the substance would not melt it. Going into the barn, they found their two horses standing motionless in their stalls. They were alive, warm to the touch, and breathing naturally, but they were powerless, even under the lashings of a whip, to move a muscle. The shepherd dog lay on the barn floor, just as he had gone to sleep. The farmer soon discovered that the dog was lifeless. He stooped down to move him and was amazed to find that he could not budge him, and it required the strength of both Weston and his wife to lift him. He had turned to solid stone. 3 days passed, during which time Weston Farm was thronged with people who flocked to see the amazing sequences of the fiery serpent's visit, and the two horses, showing no sign of recovering from their strange paralysis, were killed. In the course of a week, the labyrinth trail of the serpent out the barn crumbled away and fell off, so that the only tangible evidence of the appearance of the fiery, freezing, and paralyzing serpent that Farmer Weston had on hand is the petrified dog. Long one, but yeah, I go on to talk about, make the Medusa reference. And, this fiery serpent that made the air icy cold, um, and paralyzed himself and the horses and petrified the dog. Now, absolutely seems like fantasy, but I've read enough petrified animal people um, articles that they find animals that look like statues and everything you can imagine, people especially. And yeah, that one's just crazy, crazy story. And if anyone's heard the idea of Saint Elmo's fire, this kind of etheric flame, this blue flame that burns cold or is cold to the touch, and they used to see it all the time on ships and trains. And during snowstorms, the houses and fences would align with this blue flame. And yeah, you don't see it so much anymore today, but quite an interesting story. Hard to believe, but definitely worth reading. 1898 prehistoric race found. Traces of ancient man found at impossible levels of underlying strata. Snakes, the volcano, and the magma streams. Yeah, the electrical serpent. Um, yeah, it just makes me think of like eels, and there were stories about kind of etheric electrical dragons that moved through the air that had similar effects. The temperature would drop, and anyways, footprints in a rock. Traces of a prehistoric race found on an Indiana farm. A ledge of rock cropping out on a small watercourse on the farm of Hiram Stain near Henryville, Indiana, was recently washed off by the rains, and a curious thing has been exposed. Upon the rocks appear 15 footprints, exactly as if made by a man walking barefooted in the mud. There are most remarkable and convincing traces that man existed before the formation of at least some of the underlying strata. The rock is solid, and the prints just as solid and plain as though it was a cast of iron. There are many interesting traces of aborigines in the rocky water courses of southern Indiana. Over in Franklin County, there is a stream that, when running very low or very clear, reveals the footprints of a man in the rocky bottom. It was in southern Indiana that the prints of a dog and other animals were also found in the Flint strata. These strata were of a period prior to the glacial epoch, which covered them with alluvial deposits, and in the northern section, where there was no disturbance, completely covered all of the traces of a race prior to those of history. The footprints which are found in the rock of the farm indicate that the owner of the feet was a monster. He would require a number 12 shoe to cover the understanding which left the impression in the mud, which afterward became rock. Now, that's not crazy. I wear a 13, so number size 12 is not quite large, but perhaps in those times, you're dealing with someone probably over 6 foot. Some months ago, while making a blast, quarrymen near this point opened a solid rock which contained a pocket, and in this pocket was a live, sightless frog. Now, articles like this always take me back to my favorite one from the Carson, Nevada, in my Nevada episode, where prisoners working just outside the prison uncovered giant footprints. And not only just of a man, but of all kinds of things: cats, elephants, um, dogs. And this man's footprint was much, much larger than a number 12. I mean, they estimated this man to be 10 feet tall, and his dog probably, Great Dane or larger size. And that this giant went to the edge of a uh, lake and stuck huge timbers down into the ground and built what they thought was a blind. And following all these prints, they traced elephant prints and found that the man and the dog had killed an elephant and dragged the elephant away from the lakeside. And but yeah, these footprints are found all over the realm, big or small, with shoes and sandals and all kinds of um, advanced methods for creating shoes that we're told didn't even really exist until the 1700s, found in, 4, 5, 6 layers. And if you go by the narratives we're told today, each one of these layers can be anywhere from 25,000 to 100,000 years of time. So, again, I don't stick with the mainstream's way of dating these alluvial, quote, alluvial layers. Um, yeah, I think it's completely bogus, but no matter how deep you go, you find people. Remains of a past age, 1903. Marvelous relics of mound builders discovered in Montgomery County, Indiana. Relics of a prehistoric town inhabited by mound builders have been discovered in Montgomery County, Indiana. State geologist Blatchley has received samples of various articles. He says the collection is superior to any in the world. It comes from the farm of J. H. Allen, which he and Winton Utterback have been years in exploring. In the course of their research, without opening the mound to any considerable extent, they have discovered an axe, 15 arrowheads, a ceremonial stone, and utensils for making bowstrings. The axe is a big one, much too large and unyielding for use in war. This specimen is almost perfect. The ceremonial stone is the relic that has been taken the fancy of the state geologist. It is a smooth piece of stone resembling a double-bladed axe, with 2 grooves cut in the blades. But an uninitiated observer might take the stone for the petrified vertebrae of some monster fish. Mr. Blatchley says he believes this to be the finest of the kind in the world. Now, we found several tombs containing all kinds of crazy exotic weapons. All kinds of weapons, axes, huge swords, sabers, scimitars. Um, in Texas, I think is the craziest one. No, I found a few crystal swords. Um, in my Anomalous of America, Texas episode, they found what they believed to be an Aztec battle scene. And one of these warriors was covered in probably the most advanced single find, so to say. But the guy had a shield that was unbelievable. The workmanship was crazy: gold, silver, iron, all kinds of exotic metals. He had crystal daggers. Kind of. It always makes me think of the Black Panther, the most recent one. Very exotic weaponry, and but yeah, they found double-headed axes all over the place. And the craziest one that I can think of was New Mexico. My New Mexico episode, where they found a giant 7-foot giant with a double battle axe in both hands. He had 2 double battle axes, and in his tomb, the people had painted kind of the story of his life, and he was killing saber-toothed tigers and all kinds of wild animals. Ancient Indiana fortifications, 1873. W. Borden, who was appointed by Professor Cox to make a survey of Clark and Floyd counties under date of June 4th, writes to a friend in Louisville that on the preceding day he discovered the remains of an old fort on the high bluff along the Ohio River, just above 14 Mile Creek in Clark County. The place is said to be a natural fortification, having a perpendicular rock wall of from 100 to 150 feet at almost every point with the Ohio River and 14 Mile Creek. The creek flowing at the base of the natural wall encircles the fort in the shape of a horseshoe. Now, you'll find this a lot all over the Mississippi. Now, the Mississippi has changed its course so many times over the years that these kind of remains and these fortifications are found all over the place, not just on what would be a currently flowing river. And the horseshoe is obviously just a natural, place to build. And this goes all over the realm, especially in the American Southwest. All over the Gila and all over some of the rivers there in Arizona, Colorado. it was unbelievable. Just about every horseshoe, it seemed like they were finding these types of fortifications, and huge stone walls. These stone walls aren't, like stone walls you'd think of for like keeping sheep, or your typical idea. These are like pretty advanced, and I've shared quite a few of these very advanced stone walls over the years that seem to cover hundreds of square miles. There is a comparatively weak point on the south side where there is a 5-foot wall of dry stone with a ditch 6 feet in width inside, and the earth from the excavation is placed against the wall. So very much kind of Star Forty, with your idea of a large wall and a moat, right? Where you lift up the height of your walls and you lower the area in front, kind of doubling your distance. And the moat, that's existed and found all over the place. But in the 1800s, they were finding these quote star forts with walls that were over 100 feet tall, and they had absolutely no explanation. Now, if our historical narrative had survived continuously uninterrupted from the time of the 1700s, we would have an explanation, because they're attributing them to the French. The French obviously had nothing to do with these, and they'll kind of go down that same line here farther down this story here. But some of these forts are just hundreds and hundreds of years old, if not 1,000 or more. That even the Native Americans in the region talk about. They have no explanation of these forts for 5, 6, 7 generations back. So that's hundreds of years before the French were even in here, let alone the French couldn't have had the resources. This is kind of like the idea we have today with how we're building these cities in the 1800s with horse and buggy, let alone transporting all the materials and the labor and so on and so forth. On these older war maps, they show hundreds of star forts, hundreds on the Mississippi alone, let alone all the way up into the eastern regions. And there's just no way the French would have the labor to build these fortifications. So again, the holes in the narrative, they go way back beyond even the cities that we inhabit today, obviously, and that you find European star forts all over America. Unfortunately, many of them have been buried. There was obviously one, if not two, very serious events of some kind, cataclysmic events, that have buried some of these, like these walls I talk about that go on for hundreds of miles. There's walls that go from Guatemala that they trace all the way up into Texas. And I would go as far as to say that they go all the way up along the Mississippi River. And that they struggle to ever find the bottom of them, 60, 80 feet deep, and they don't ever find the bottom. The entrance of the fort was apparently at the bed of the shore, which is on the backbone of the river, 20 feet over. Here there was at one time a wall, but it has been thrown down. Inside of the fort, several large mounds measuring 45 feet in diameter. So that just gives you an idea of how large this quote fort is. And remember, they're using the natural shape of not only the river, but also the cliffside, which is 100 feet tall, if not more. So they're using the natural formations, and they're building walls to kind of use those to their best advantage. And within this fort, so to say, are several large mounds measuring 45 feet in diameter. So several of them. Now, these walls have been buried, obviously, because there's only a few feet of them exposed. Now, imagine how large they really are. If, again, the Mississippi's overflowed its bounds and floods all the time, imagine how much silt. This is 1858. They have no explanation of this fort. How many, 100 years at least, quotations from when the French possibly could have done it. And yeah, you're dealing with absurdities here. There's so much so there's mounds built within them. And the mounds are massive. It's 45 feet in diameter, and there's several of them, doesn't even tell you how many. On the mound and on the embankment, white oak trees with trunks from 2 or 3 feet in diameter are growing. The space inside the walls is 10 to 12 acres or more large. A small portion of the ground which has been cleared inside the fort is strewn with Indian flints, indicating that the place was at one time occupied by the Indians and doubtless afterward held by the French. Right, held by the French, not built by the French. A good spring of water issues from the rock on the north side. Of course, again, springs and wells go hand in hand. Many of the ancient ones I described in my Tennessee video, same thing. Forts that are hundreds and hundreds of years old, where the natives have the natives say they've been in ruins since their great 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 grandfathers came to this area, and that they also describe at least very deep wells or springs that are still flowing. The situation of the fort is a most beautiful one and commands a full view of the surrounding country. From the top of the walls, a fine view can be obtained of the Ohio River for 14 miles either way. There is also a good view across the river into Kentucky for 3 miles, and for 3 miles back into Indiana. The oldest people living in the neighborhood have no record of this place as a fortified position. It was doubtless constructed during the French and Indian War. I highly doubt that. And in those perilous times formed a safe retreat for the early settlers of the state. Now, again, going back through so many of these that I've shared, that we have hundreds of examples where they just keep falling back on it must have been built by the French. They're building hundreds of these, in a 5-year time frame. You look at the French and Indian War again, and none of it adds up. And there's no way they struggle to find men, let alone men to build these things and fight a war. It makes no sense. 148. Good to have you here, guys. Thanks again. Hope you're enjoying this material. Yeah, we'll get into some longer ones here, and these are kind of some older ones. Some of these are 5 years old or more. So, the Great Cave in Indiana. We are just informed by N.J. Coleman, Esquire, who has recently visited the Great Indiana Cave, that another immense cavern has been discovered, opening from the original cave, which in extent, curiosities, and mineral productions far surpasses the old cave. Mr. Coleman discovered an aperture just before reaching Jacob's ladder, into which a large man could hardly enter, and desired the party which accompanied him to explore it. The guide and 2 or 3 of the party objected, as the aperture appeared to descend rapidly, and they feared they might meet with bad air. By a little persuasion, however, they were prevailed upon to make the exploration. With much difficulty they descended some 40 feet, when, to their great astonishment, they found themselves in an immense apartment. They immediately determined to fully explore the cave they had discovered. They found that this room opened into others, and these still into others, and that apparently there was no termination of the cave. They followed the main passage some 4 or 5 miles, according to their best calculations, when they were admonished by their lights that they must return. On their way back, they visited some of the rooms which they had passed, in which were found large beds of Epsom salts in nearly a pure state. We are also informed that the cave contains fine specimens of saltpeter, plaster of Paris, alabaster, and etc., of which the party procured many fine specimens. Now, I believe it was my Kentucky episode. I talk quite a lot about the cave systems, and that saltpeter was so important during the war effort because I believe it's used in many things, but one of the most important things was dynamite or some kind of gunpowder creation. And that it was in such high demand that they were using these cave systems not only for storage of munitions, but to harvest much of these kind of precious minerals. And that in these cave systems that extend through Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio, all along the kind of Mississippi Valley area, that in Kentucky alone, one of the articles I read, they had found and burned thousands of mummies, thousands. And that some of the ones that survived and made it to the light of day were sold at quite insane prices, especially for the mid 1800s. All kinds of tombs were found, elaborate burials, um, Egyptian hieroglyphics, iconography, all kinds of relics. And that, so when you find apertures in rooms like this makes me think that just as we stumbled upon these ancient mines and these ancient burial chambers, that this would be the same thing, right? Epsom salts were highly sought after, and that even the Native Americans described that when they found these ancient mines, they had been mined by a previous race. Epsom salts, saltpeter, alabaster, plaster of Paris, on and on. I think we're looking at a very, very old mining system. And again, they never even describe reaching the terminus of this cave. Mm. We can now say to our sister state, Kentucky, that Indiana has a cavern which far surpasses the Great Mammoth. As the last discovery in connection with the Great Indiana Cave, we will make it one of the largest in the United States. So yeah, again, Mammoth Cave, the things they found in there are unbelievable, and many of the first people to explore, beyond the first mile or so, and really, they hired people from out of state, and the military brought in some people, and they were able to explore beyond again a mile, 2 miles, 5 miles, 12 miles. They found 30 plus miles of caverns, and their language to describe them was like finding an abandoned city. And again, going by the um, fact that they were burning and pulling out thousands, not one or two, but thousands of mummies, just goes to show you, you know, that what kind of race were we dealing with on the surface, if that was the kind of level or extent the tombs for this culture. Giant bones are unearthed. Skeleton of Indian found near White's Town. While a number of farmers were loading gravel at the gravel pit on the farm of Renus Eisenhower, 3 miles north of Whitestown, Monday, they found a human skeleton of great size at a depth of about 4 feet. A slight cave in from the side of the pit revealed the skeleton, which lay in a horizontal position. David Neese and Lindsay Hines, supervisors of the roads north of Whitestown, directed the men to remove the bones carefully, and they succeeded in exhuming them practically intact. Resting beside the skeleton were the bones of a smaller animal resembling those of a dog. Man buried with his dog. You can't believe how many of those I found. The skeleton was removed to Whitestown, and Dr. P. B. Little pronounced it to be that of an Indian of immense stature. The bones forming the lower half of the skull are very large, especially the jaw bones, which contain perfect sets of teeth. The skeleton was left at the office of Dr. Little, where it has been viewed by great numbers of people. I think what we got. Mine cutters, serpent. Okay, so we got two more here, and then we'll start looking at some full size excerpts here. Looking through here, damn, only 4 feet. Up there he is. We're gonna take a 2 minute break, maybe less than that. Uh, I'll be right back, guys. Oh, I'm back. Like I said, when the baby wakes up, I got to take a little break, and we're back. Okay, where was I? Uh, let's take a little look through here. All right, baby. Yeah, why does Ben not have more subs? Well, that's nice of you to say, but he's got to work. Things. It's an ebb and flow, I suppose. Keystone at the crossing was big time shopping area. Keystone. Uh, something funny, Lucy Rose. The neighborhood I was raised in was developed by a Masonic gentleman. Brickstone, and the neighborhood was called Keystone. It's funny. I used to go to high school with St. Columbus and passed out demos. St. Columbus. Robert Lawson, Ben loves what he does. You can tell. Thanks, Robert. Appreciate it. Mishawaka, Buster. Oh, Old World Minmac. Keep up the amazing work. Thanks. Danico, it's been a long time. Welcome. All I ever think about are ancient giants. He's right outside Columbus. The structures are far beyond what has been put forth by Squire and Davis in relation. The earthworks, yeah. Yeah, the earthworks are crazy. Imagine, that's only, 10, 20, 30, maybe 40 feet below the surface. In some of the articles, I've been lucky enough to go 100, 200 feet below the surface, California, Colorado, Missouri, Mississippi. We go down to those levels and you're finding unbelievable things, completely buried civilizations. Oh, Crypto Alchemist. Good to see you. Thanks for being here. Let's get back into the material. This one's going to be a little more efficient. Okay, so we make the following extract from an article in the October number of the Masonic Review, descriptive of some ancient Masonic emblems found in an Indian mound near Centersville, Indiana. The particular mound we have alluded to as existing near Centersville, Indiana, was 54 feet in diameter and 8 feet in height. When the country was first settled, the large oak trees growing on the top and sides of it were removed, the earth being needed in the construction of a road that was being opened near it. Being thus partly undermined, some months since a portion of the earth on one side slid down and revealed some curious articles near the center and at the base of the mound. Among them was a square, a level, a keystone, and a chisel. The square and level were permitted to remain in the possession of some boys, who most unfortunately broke them to pieces. The keystone and the chisel were secured by a worthy brother and kindly forwarded to us, and are carefully preserved in the archives of our office. The chisel is composed of black hornstone, a species of hard slate. The keystone is composed of an indurated slate. Indurated, interesting. And of variegated colors. The latter has a small hole through it, as though it had been worn by a string attached to the person. It is finished up with an exactness which could not be excelled by the most skillful workmen of the present day. The same may be said of the other articles, except the chisel, which appears to have had less care exercised in its completion. Yeah, these Masonic emblems and tools are found all over, especially in the American Southwest. Remarkable discovery: antediluvian sea serpent in Indiana. Its petrified body 180 feet below the surface. Other singular petrifactions. The Sullivan, Indiana Union gives an account of one of the most wonderful discoveries of the age, which was made in Curriesville coal mines a few days ago. At a depth of 180 feet, while the miners were cutting through a slate stone, they discovered the petrified body of a sea serpent. We examined its petrifaction and can say with truth that it is the finest specimen we ever saw. Unfortunately, it was broken into three pieces, and a piece from near the center is missing, perhaps thrown out in a silver of stone. A limb had evidently fallen across the serpent about 8 or 10 inches from the head and mashed the part underneath flat. And strange to say, even this thin part was formed into solid stone and was taken out perfect. The wrinkles in the body of the serpent, in its writhing as if to extricate itself from the stick that fell across it, were as perfect and natural as the day the affair took place. The head is shaped like that of an eel, and the tail, from indications, must have been supplied with a broad fin or flat, fleshy substance as a propeller. The eyes and mouth can be distinctly traced, while the body is covered similar to those on a hog's skin, though not so small or numerous. This specimen is 5 feet 3 inches long, near 10 inches around, and the largest part of the body. In addition to this most singular curiosity, perfect impressions of leaves, limbs, brush, and other samples of vegetation were taken out at enormous depth. Among these was a beautiful impression of what is familiarly called snakeweed or fern, which grows in almost every valley throughout the Western country. The most singular specimen is yet to be described. And in attempting to communicate the fact to our readers, we feel as though the history of our earth is just as much a mystery to the present generation as it was to those who inhabited it before the flood. Well said. That sentence alone is worth, um, you know, worth its weight in gold. I couldn't agree with it more. I'm going to read it one more time. The history of our earth is just as much a mystery to the present generation as it was to those who inhabited it before the flood. The half having not yet been told. I think 90% of the story hasn't been told. The sole of a shoe or a sandal was taken out in a complete state of petrifaction. The heel is almost perfect, and the impression of something in the heel resembling tacks or nails is plain and distinct. The specimen is about 8 inches long and of the usual width. When this discovery is seriously considered in connection with the general formation of the earth for a circumstance, circumference, my apologies, of between 70 and 80 miles around, there not being a hill of any material height, not a ravine of any depth, worthy of remark, not a cavern, and the Wabash the largest stream within this scope, and the earth almost level, and thickly and heavily timbered, what mine can we go down into the bowels of the earth 180 feet beneath the firmly rooted, aged oaks of the forest and solve the mysteries there unfolded? So that was phrased a little oddly, but basically what he's saying is like we're on a flat plane. In what direction can we go and go 180 feet down and find more stuff? So, you know, and for those of you that don't know, I did a video on the history of coal. I talk about its formation, but in a long way, a short answer basically being that our burnt buried past is what becomes coal. Now, what's crazy about that is that normal for the majority of it, again, organic matter, but a large percentage of it is trees. And we're dealing with I mean, not only huge trees, but a serious growth. Not just tight, we're not just talking about giant, sequoias, 100 feet, 180 feet, 200 feet, 300 feet. We're talking, I've shared petrified trees that are in the thousands of feet tall. And that in many cases in these coal mines, they dig into standing forests, not trees laid over, but standing forests, whole forest, top to bottom. And, like these last two paragraphs state, right, that the history of Earth is just as much a mystery to the present generation as it is to those who inhabited it before the flood. And going back to what I was saying at the beginning of my live stream here, sharing with you guys, and since there's so many more people in this watching now, but in this video here, Ancient Buried Races of America, that this gentleman goes down and finds 4 previous civilizations below what we call the ancient Mayas or Aztecs, that there's 4 buried levels of civilization, and that they almost become more advanced the deeper we go. And as this author here is finishing up saying that we're standing in the middle of a basically large open plain, how many times and in what direction can we just go out, a mile this way, 5 miles this way, and dig down 180 feet? And what are we going to find? So, as he stated, and similar to what they find in many, many, many coal beds, they find animals, people, footprints, um, vegetation unknown to the area, ferns, tropical plants, all kinds of stuff, right? That's the thing about coal. Now, these coal companies that exist today, and many of the mining companies, I mean, these mining companies are very much wise to what would have had to have happened on this realm for these different minerals to come into existence. And not only the different minerals, but the coal beds, especially. If you guys aren't familiar with Kent Hovind, um, man, he was a nobody to the majority of this kind of YouTube world, but man, his short clips have just exploded all over YouTube Shorts. And I don't have TikTok, and I've never been on TikTok, but some friends have told me that he's all over TikTok. But Ken Hovind is a Christian man, fantastic researcher, and he talks quite a lot about the coal layers and how they are such a powerful um, identifier to our past, and that within these coal beds they find all kinds of crazy stuff, petrified lizards like this sea serpent that was what 100 and what did I say, 180 feet below the surface. Sea serpents they find, and I think the dimensions were 5 feet, an eel 5 feet across. And I have lizards that go over 1,000 feet in length, so you can only imagine. um but yeah, the coal beds are a huge, huge, huge giveaway. I think that was the last one here on the Twitter threads, and then we're gonna go thumb through some PDFs and pick some good ones. Hopefully we can knock out 2 or 3 of those, and we'll probably end this around 6:15, so another half hour or so. And as always, guys, thank you for being here. Oh, Jose, thank you for the $5 super sticker. I appreciate it. My most common donator, Jose. I appreciate you, man. Thanks for always following along, and your donations today. Every penny helps. All right, I'm gonna thumb through some of these, and we're just gonna I'll try to pick some good ones here because I have so many. Finds prehistoric village. This one's pretty good, and this is from, again, a lot of, so depending on, like, if I was at work, I'll clip an article, and if I'm at home on my computer, I'll clip a whole page, or depending on where I am, if I'm on the road or whatever I'm doing, I sometimes save a whole PDF. Sometimes I just clip. And unfortunately, not all of the full PDFs have the date and time. But none of these are later than like 1905. I would say they're probably in the range of 1850 through 1890, in that range. So again, I apologize, I don't have the exact specifics on all of them. Some of them will have more information on here, others do not. So this is the Coconino Sun. Finds prehistoric village. Indiana farmer. We'll zoom in a little bit more for you guys. Indiana farmer said to have discovered bones and ancient pottery in the sand pit. What appears to be the remains of a village of earlier civilization of America was discovered at a depth of 17 feet. There's that number again. On the farm of John A. Gray, residing 9 miles north of Muncie, Indiana, says the Chicago Chronicle. And the discovery is attracting the attention of people for miles around. Bones of several skeletons of a race of people, apparently of giant size, were found. Almost all were in a remarkable state of preservation. Besides these were a number of earthen bowls or pots, several pieces of small iron rods, one bearing a handle of some unknown material. The discovery was made at the bottom of a sand pit. According to the size of the bones, the persons averaged a height of 8 feet. When asked relative to the discovery, Mr. Gray told a most remarkable story, which strangely coincides with the discovery of which still renders the find all the more mysterious. He stated that several months ago, two strange men called at his home and asked permission to dig in the sandpit. They were strangers. The privilege was not granted. At this, the stranger said that he would rue the refusal as long as he lived, as there was an Indian village far beneath the earth's surface, and nearby would be found a buried treasure in gold. Imagine those guys turning up on your place, in the 1800s. Threatening you basically. Listen, man, below your land is a buried Indian village full of gold. You definitely think they were nuts until one day you got the itch to go dig, huh? Now, this brings up an article that I thought I had in my thread here, but it appears that I do not. And I want to try and see if I can find it really quick. It talks about bones of a giant around 18 feet tall. And I may be mistaken on the state here. Just give me 1 second. Yeah, I think I did miss one. Let's go back here real quick. Yeah, so this is one I forgot to put in my thread here real quick, and I want to read this one. It stood out just because of the information here as well. Cave found in Indiana hits age-old race, 1924. Giant skeletons and metals, strange to America, seen in ancient sepulcher. Blind snakes are found. Bottomless pit temporarily halts all explorations. Be resumed at a later date. Indianapolis, February 1st. Recent discoveries in widely separated localities of the hills of southern Indiana. Now, southern Indiana is a crazy place. Now, it's full of some of the craziest cave systems in America. Not only that, it's got some of the craziest mound systems. Now, I've talked a lot throughout my last few episodes, especially along the Mississippi, with my theories correlating that not only were some of these mounds burial mounds, but the majority of them were large buildings that extended several stories below ground. And if you've seen my Anomalous America Missouri episode, this will stand out and you'll remember what I'm talking about. If you haven't, I would go back and check out that episode. That's a fantastic episode. Some of my favorite articles of all time are from Missouri. Now, why that's important is that these mounds, they found they were all connected underground by large tunnels, and that these large tunnels went into the mountains. So I've correlated that I think these cave systems were subterranean highways. Think of it kind of like, what is the phrase? The Underground Railroad, right? For saving slaves, that you could travel from the north to the south completely underground. Now, in my oh man, which one was it? It may have been Arkansas. I'm not sure. I talk about the cave systems in the Ozarks that are hundreds of miles. They mapped 300 miles where you could travel 300 miles underground. I think you could go all the way through the Ozarks and the Appalachian Range, and these kind of deep underground military bases are just repurposed old world subterranean systems. and that the mounds are connected with this. So the mounds um, were entrances or doorways into not only these cave systems, but also these mound, man-made mound systems, and that these tunnels go under the rivers, they go under the Mississippi, they go under everything, and they go into the mountain ranges. And yeah, in one of my videos, I talk about one of the lost tribes being found in South America, and that they said that to escape their enemies, they've been living underground for several generations. And I think that was the case here. And that many of them even said that life on the surface became so dangerous. I think they were speaking of cataclysms of some kind, that they all retreated underground. Anyways, long off topic ramble here, but southern Indiana is a crazy place full of the largest collection of mounds in the state, as well as tunnel systems and cave systems. Anyone from Indiana in the chat, they'll know that, all the big caves are in southern Indiana, as well as the mound complexes, southern Indiana. Where was I? Sorry. Something to generals. Okay. Recent discoveries in the southern hills of Indiana. Something to the general store of knowledge of natural history. The topography of Indiana is interesting. From sand dunes, remember, sand, you can get sand as we know it today, especially the silica, high silica forms from the breakdown of wood, especially large grained wood. Now, if you're talking about huge titanic trees, this is something Ken Hovind touches on, not just the coal layers, but the sand dunes. And the kind of the idea of the Sahara and these titan trees being petrified instantly through electrical phenomenon, and over time being broken down into these kind of grains of sand. But under these sand pits, you could think of, especially in California, they found that under many of these dunes were huge buried cities. Colorado, same thing. Arizona, same thing. So I would go as far as to say that a lot of these sand dunes are over the top of some crazy ancient formation. Probably a large civilization, if I had to guess. Sand dunes bordering Lake Michigan to rolling hills which occupy the southern part and in places are but little short of small mountains. In the hills, however, the geologists have found most to interest him more recently the archaeologists. The State Museum in Indianapolis is crowded with evidence of a prehistoric past, but with small resources, it cannot make the most of opportunity it might otherwise have of tearing off the veil from long gone ages. What a great paragraph. That seems to be the issue that we're always dealing with here in the 1800s and 1900s is more discovery than they know what to do with. They don't have enough labor to deal with all this discovery. The opening of an ancient sepulchre built by a race of men antedating the American Indian and probably not related to the mound builders. Powerful, powerful statement there, because they were just chalking everything up to the mound builders, which is a bunch of ridiculous nonsense, because we're finding that these 2-3 layers deep, we're dealing with cultures that are quite comparatively different. Has aroused much curiosity. This occurred in Jennings County, 10 miles from North Vernon, in a bend of a small creek where some excavating was done in a mound built by human hands and reaching 100 feet in height and about the same in diameter. Before digging was stopped to await the arrival of more scientific help, some interesting things were found. Bodies guarded. Protected by great stone slabs, skeletons of 3 men, the longest of which measured much beyond that of modern man, were found. They showed the infinite care had been taken that the remains be preserved against the ravages of the elements. Metals not common in North America also were found. This is a huge marker because, like I mentioned with some of my findings in Texas, but also the rock wall of Texas, as well as the Great Wall of Mississippi, that they were finding in these kind of concretes exotic metals not found in the area. I think we're dealing with a similar type of culture. Although the locality has been settled for more than 100 years, residents near Folsomville in the extreme southwestern part of the state did not know until recently that a cave of mammoth proportions existed close at hand. Now, I'm not sure if they're talking about Winnedette Cave, but the cave systems in this region, as I was mentioning before, are insane and extensive, and the public still to this day does not know the extent or the end. We're told Winnedette in the late 1800s, Winnedette Cave was 30 miles, and I think today it's publicly talked about being maybe 20, maybe less than that. So they just they scale it back and they scale it back. Oh, we found something crazy. Okay, it's only 10 feet. It's only 10 miles. The discovery was made by a hunter who accidentally stumbled upon the entrance. The cave revealed some things which easily outdo the author of the Arabian Nights and have the added advantage of more veracity, perhaps. The most interesting find was a species of blind snake which hissed so loudly that the Stygian gloom of the earth's innermost recesses becomes all the more hideous. Nestor and some friends succeeded in capturing two specimens alive, and they were sent to the Smithsonian Institution in Washington. After Nestor and his party proceeded at a distance of 1,500 feet, they came upon a pit, which apparently had no bottom. It was sounded to a depth of 2,500 feet. One compartment of the cave was warm and comfortable, and another extremely frigid. Nestor, the discoverer, said he believed a race of prehistoric men knew of the cave's presence and made it their home, and added its size would accommodate thousands as a dwelling place. He found many things to indicate human habitation, including arrowheads and stone implements. Yeah, the stone slab, giant skeletons. I mean, pretty crazy. I've probably done at least 10 of these ancient tombs, if not more, below ground. Um, some of you may remember. Well, let's go back here real quick. This was never part of my Anomalous America episode because it came out of Canada at the beginning of the cave. Whoops, I don't want to play it, but this one right here, it's called Subterranean Kingdom of Atlantis in the Rockies, War with Dragons and Ancient Races of America. This one's incredible. If you love the subterranean topics, this is probably the best cave story I have. In fact, it is the best cave story I have. Um, this one right here, The Realms of Darkness, this was supposed to be my intro video to Anomalous America, Indiana, Strange Discoveries in Indiana Caves. That's a whole article, and I do a half an hour video on the article. It's pretty amazing. Again, since we're talking about it, it's here. The origins of coal, pretty insane. That'll show you a lot of the uh, information I was talking about when it comes to thinking about what lies below our feet. And we're kind of dealing with this cyclical um, reset realm that we inhabit, where these things have happened several times, right? We live in the fifth age. The Aztecs talked about, and the Mayans, that we were wiped by 4 previous cataclysms, and that we're living in the fifth age. That number varies depending on whose cosmology and cosmogony you're talking about, but there are a lot of similarities when they talk about not just a single deluge, but several events that have wiped out several civilizations. And the historical records, especially in this time period, um, strongly adhere to those ideas. This one is Bigger Than Jumbo: Discovery of a Prehistoric Monster in Indiana. Now, you heard me talking about elephants. Now, elephants existing here in America is really important. Not just mammoths, but they find several different um, types of mammoth or elephant. I'm sorry. And there is a difference between the two. But yeah, this is from 1882. Vincennes, Indiana, July 21st. A party consisting of Professor McCrary, president of Vincennes University, Dr. Jopert Jessup, Mr. C.J. McCord, who brought the tusk to the city. Mr. Albert Folks and a correspondent left the city in a 2-horse convenience for White River, where the mammoth tusk was recently found, for the purpose of making an extended search and an endeavor to find, if possible, the other parts of the mammoth animal to which the tusk originally belonged. The distance was about 15 miles from the city, arriving at the spot, which was at once identified by finding a piece about 7 inches long, which had come off the large end of the tusk. The party proceeded to explore with shovel and pick for further developments, but after a fruitless search, it was given up. The spot where the tusk was found is one of romantic beauty. At the water's edge is a flat rock surface which extends directly out onto the river about 75 feet and is evidently growing in size each year. And the water, as it turns the bend in the river, gradually washing out the bank, which 200 or 300 yards, my apologies, rises perpendicularly above the rock. I'm going to kind of fast forward here. The river, by digging, had been unearthed. Being disappointed in this, the party started on a search along the bank of the river, and upon reaching a large clump of willow bushes about 1/8 of a mile below, found a large amount of pieces of the tusk and had evidently been caught and held by the brushes. Among one pieces of a considerable importance, it is being the point of the tusk. The piece is about 4 inches long and about 3 or 4 inches in diameter. The pieces more strikingly shows itself to be genuine ivory than other portions of the tusk. It's showing plainly in traverse sections different colored lines running in circular arcs and forming by the long shaped spaces. What has been found tends to confirm previous estimates of its length being between 10 and 12 feet. That was the big part I wanted to touch on there. And the tusk would have weighed anywhere from 150 to 200 pounds. If these portions were carried out, it would make the animal from 3 to 5 times the size of Jumbo and an elephant gigantus or mammoth. It is believed that an organized effort with professional shovelers might secure other bones of the animal. Now, I know this isn't anything new, the idea of mammoths and large elephants and mammals roaming this region, but still, the size and proportions are what I wanted to touch on. This, if the proportions were carried out, would make the animal 3 to 5 times the size of Jumbo. Huge. Absolutely gigantic. All right. This is a big one. This one is 1886, called the Mound Building Race. The wonderful work in Indiana of a strange prehistoric people. Same thing. This one's not too bad. Okay. At Plymouth Church yesterday afternoon, Mr. W.H. Smith lectured to the school children, his subject being the mound builders. The lecture was exceedingly interesting and instructive. Let's zoom in. I know it's small text. Again, I apologize. We're over here on the left side. He said that no one could answer the question as to who were the mound builders or whence they came. They have left their monuments behind them, but nothing to tell from whence they came, how long they dwelt here, and what became of them. The evidence that they once peopled the forests and fields of Indiana are found in the mounds and the fortifications they have left behind them, and the weapons, tools, pottery, and skeletons taken from the mounds scattered over the country. Every schoolchild knows of the pyramids of Egypt, of the wonderful masonry in the walls of Nineveh and Babylon, and perhaps something about the ruined and buried cities of Central America. But how few know anything of the wonders of their own state? The works left by this prehistoric race are of 3 kinds: fortifications, mounds, and memorial pillars. The largest mound in the world is on the plains of Cahokia, Illinois, opposite the city of St. Louis. Now, again, that's a really good one. That's the things they found below Cahokia will blow your mind. Again, just check out my Anomalous America Missouri episode. I also talk about Cahokia a lot in the Illinois episode. It is 700 feet long by 500 feet wide at the base and 98 feet high. Now, what's crazy, again, and important, like I touched on earlier, is they found that the mound of Cahokia extends 3 or 4 stories below ground. Okay, and it has tunnel systems that go under the Mississippi into St. Louis. It has tunnel systems that go to Monk's Mound. It has tunnel systems that extend into the mountainside. So there are tunnels under Cahokia that go all the way into St. Louis under the Mississippi. They go to Monk's Mound and on in different directions. So subterranean highway under these mounds. At Grave Creek near Parkersburg, West Virginia, and at Miamisburg, Ohio, there are remarkable mounds. Both are conical in shape. Now, why is that important? Well, the conical mound I touch on, it has a lot of really important overlays, not just with the kind of Etruscan motifs, but you find these conical mounds all over Alaska. I posted quite a lot about those in my Alaska episode. And you find these conical mounds all over Italy and in Mexico. Really important, the conical shape, because there are distinct shapes. The first is 70 feet high and the other 68 feet. They are burial mounds and mark the graves of distinguished dead. In Grant County, Wisconsin, is a mound known as Elephant Mound for its shape. And in Adams County, Ohio, is the Serpent Mound, an earthwork about 1,000 feet long. Oh, thank you, Jen. Appreciate you very much. Anyone know when the Smithsonian was founded? In the 1800s. I'm working on a several-part series about the Smithsonian. Can't exactly say when I'm going to get around to it. I've got basically one whole episode finished, and I've got probably 50 clippings worth of material, as well as, kind of thumbing through Wikipedia and some books from the time frame describing the Smithsonian, kind of Indiana Jones-esque, And so, yeah, that's going to be fun. But yeah, time is an issue for me, and I definitely don't even know when I'll begin to start on that series. But anyone that's followed my show knows how much I've talked about the Smithsonian, and that they were buying up relics left and right, and they were paying hunters to travel the world and kill these kind of curiosities, these survivors or lingerers, as I call them, that had made it through these cataclysmic periods from one period to the next. This kind of changeover events where these animals come from a previous age and through maybe going underground or surviving in a water, something like that, and make it into this time frame. And they're hunted to the ends of the earth, and they're paid upwards of millions of dollars in some cases. In Grant County, Wisconsin, the Elephant Mound, okay, and in Adams County, right, I already read that, my apologies. From whatever place they came, the mound builders clung closely to the great rivers, and nearly all their works are found along them. It would seem now remember, many of these mounds are star maps. So not only would you want the waterways for travel, but from a symbolical religious standpoint, water is 100% necessary. It's incredibly rare to find a temple not near the ocean or a river. It would seem the great center of population was not far from the junction of the Ohio and the Mississippi rivers. It is evident that Indiana, Ohio, and Illinois were once densely populated by them. In Ohio alone, there are more than 10,000 tumuli, which is old name for mounds, and 1,500 enclosures. The southern half of Indiana is dotted all over with their works, like I was stating earlier, and quite a number have been found in the northern half. Knox and Sullivan counties are the most favored. Around the city of Vincennes, there are more than 40 large mounds and 100 smaller ones. The immense shell heaps here have given Professor Collette much data to attain his theory of the existence of a race intermediate between the mound builders and the Indians. I agree. There are many different civilizations. Knox County has 3 mounds that for symmetry of shape will rival any in the country. They are known as Pyramid Mound, Sugarloaf Mound, and Terraced Mound. One mound in the town of Spencer yielded 25 wagon loads of bones, representing about 5,000 bodies. Whew, crazy. A mound in Worthington yields some rare relics besides the skeletons found. In Morgan County, there is a beautiful mound about 100 feet in diameter and 25 feet high. The fortifications or walled enclosures are more numerous in Ohio than in this state and more extensive. But in Indiana, there are some well worthy of attention. The mound builders possess a chain of fortification reaching from the southern part of New York diagonally across the country to the Wabash River, and another chain beginning in Clark County, Indiana, running north to Madison County, thence east to central Ohio, then south through Kentucky into Tennessee. And this is what I was talking about earlier, that these go all the way, into South America. I think these walls go from South America continuously all the way into the Americas. These fortifications are just little outcroppings, little remnants that we find left over from these events that have buried the majority of them under material. The only important walled enclosure in western Indiana is near the town of Merome in Sullivan County. It has been christened Fort Atzland. Go figure. Another Atzland, because there's a Fort Atzland in Wisconsin, I want to say. Correct me, anybody in chat, if you remember what state that's in. So, no coincidence, that's the name of it. Its extreme length is about 1,200 feet, varying in width from 50 to 400 feet. The most wonderful defensive work of this prehistoric race is in Clark County on the Ohio River, a few miles about Jeffersonville. In the county of Madison, not far from the town of Anderson, is a section rich with historical interest. Within half a mile are two groups of works. The principal work is a circular embankment 10 feet high, 69 feet wide at the base, and broad enough to furnish a pleasant drive for a carriage. Now, that's really important because this is exactly how they described many of the really, really big walls in the southern states, Mississippi and Texas. So again, the principal work is a circular embankment 10 feet high, 69 feet wide at the base, and broad enough to furnish a pleasant drive for a carriage. Now, that's pretty incredible. A lot of walls are described that same way. On the inside is a ditch 60 feet wide and 10 feet deep. To the west of this are four other smaller enclosures. There is near Winchester the remains of a beautiful walled enclosure. This is not only the largest in the state, but it is the most scientifically laid out. It encloses an area of about 30 acres. In shape, it is a parallelogram with curved angles. The sides have a length of 1,350 feet and the ends of 1,200 feet. The principal mounds mentioned in the lecture were illustrated by drawings made by Ben Hyman. On next Friday afternoon, Dr. L.D. Waterman will deliver his lecture on Mexico. Isn't this funny that this is a talk they're giving to kids? 1886. And this list of forts, I did kind of a deeper dive, and you can only find about a third of these. So they've just been dismantled or covered up or who knows what. But yeah, another Fort Atzlan. That's really impressive. We're going to thumb through these. I said we're going to end at 6:15. We're going to give it a few more minutes just because I got a lot of material left. Remains of big animals. I'm just going to kind of read some captions, and maybe I'll do a kind of a wrap-up video and just go over some of the ones I missed. Remains of big animals, mastodons, elephants, and other great creatures once roamed over Indiana. Evidences that the state has undergone extreme climate changes in the prehistoric past. Oh man, this is a really good one. I remember this one talking about all the foliage and crazy stuff they found, and that like most of America used to be a tropical climate. Ancient horses. Yeah, that one's a big one. Oh. Thanks for sticking with me. Welcome back to getting this whole ball rolling on Anonymous America. Hopefully you're enjoying some of the material I'm sharing. This one's pretty good. Rich. We'll just do a quick little read of this one here. This is from 1892. It's called Skeletons of a Prehistoric Tribe Discovered in Indiana. A rich archaeological find was unearthed Saturday 2 miles west of the city in a gravel pit along high bluffs of Sugar Creek. Thus far, 25 skeletons of Aboriginal stature have been exhumed, and the unburying of these mammoth bones is still going on. This necropolis of long ago was filled with excited hunters of curios and the scientific students from Wabash College almost continually. And as soon as the skeletons are removed from the gravel, their rattling bones are carried away to become part of departments of archaeology. The last skeleton taken from the burying ground was a gigantic one, measuring 7 feet in length. The femur alone would prove that it was of a giant and that the bones are twice the size of an ordinary man. The grinning head of the giant had a perfect set of teeth and wore enamel as beautiful as polished marble. The bones of the face were perfect in every way, notwithstanding the fact that they must have been endured here for centuries. The entire absence of vegetable matter in the soil and the perfect drainage would account for the preservation of the bony structure. Most of the bodies represent the framework of men evidently extinct for centuries. This is certainly the first discovery of skeletons in which the characteristic development of the giant was observed. It is though by local scientists that these bones belong to a tribe of Aborigines, but this theory cannot be fully established. Yeah, as we know, there are many Indian tribes full of 7 foot tall people, so it's hard to say, but still, nonetheless, very important. Um, what was this one? I can't remember them all. Gambling? No, skipping that one. Famous Lost River. This is a good one. This talks about how the earth in the southern part of Indiana is just covered with unbelievable amounts of subterranean networks that go on for they estimate hundreds of miles as they lose rivers and they reappear hundreds of miles away. This is just part of that crazy amount of caverns and networks that exist in southern Indiana, and why I was saying that so many of these mounds are in this same area. Um, Yep. Not a lot in this one, I think, that would be too interesting. Um, those who have made a study of the subterranean streams of Indiana and Kentucky have advanced the theory that away below the surface of Indiana, in at least the southern portion, there is a secondary great system of waterways and subterranean rivers. Some geologists of note have conjectured in this theory. It is known that such streams do exist in the extreme southern section. Winnedette and other caves owe their origin to these streams. Some years ago, a subterranean stream was found running under Rush County almost 70 miles. The water can be heard roaring through the passageways, and at times the course seems to be overtaxed. It evidently flows a great distance from the northeast, and probably has its source in the St. Lawrence River system. And English, must be a city, a flood resulted in the discovery of another lost river. A new cavern was opened by the water in Crawford County. The attractiveness of Lost River and its tributaries is enhanced greatly by the weird, wild scenery of Orange County. And there is no section of the state where the scenery is more striking and diversified. That seems to be the case with a lot of these areas, these cavernous cave systems and where these mounds exist, that they're often quite striking and beautiful and special places. And minerally rich, too. I don't think there's a coincidence there. Um, Can't remember what all these were about, but for the sake of wrapping this up for all of you out there and not wasting anyone's time. Okay, so this was the article I did called The Realms of Darkness. I have a separate video on this one. Really interesting. Strange discoveries in numerous caves and caverns of Indiana. Eyeless fish, animals found underground, dwelling places, the origin of subterranean streams and passages. Pretty crazy. That was a good one, especially when you look at it from the lens of how I started the show off talking about the sepulchres and these hidden tombs and all the mummies they're finding in these places. And yeah, burial place of giants, skeletons of ancient race unearthed in Indiana. Many traditions brought out by the discovery evidences of an extinct tribe of very large Americans. Yeah, more 7-footers, tons of them in this burial mound. None were in a separate grave. They were all piled together. 10 were found in one place. Sitting posture, very important. The sitting posture. Sitting posture is big. Big, quote, Asian connection there. A lot of the mounds in Mexico and many of the mounds in the American Southwest, they're found. The mummies are bound with their knees to their chest. Now that's a very distinct cultural thing. The mystery of the far famed Indiana River, which loses itself. This is another one that talks about all the rivers that disappear into these cave systems, and why I've kind of made the correlation over the years that they do have pretty interesting correlations when it comes to thinking about them from the lens of dealing with giant trees. And the idea of limestone and how such huge amounts of limestone could be created, and just the layering of the earth and how that all came to be is, there's a lot of really hidden truths in that. And again, why I was talking about why these mining companies, they really have some incredible secrets, and why they're so kind of centrally owned. Um, but yeah, big one there, big marker there. The limestone, sandstone. Um, the idea that perhaps these kind of tombs and sepulchers were just carved into old trees. And I've talked about this before when it came to, kind of my avatar references, and why the pagoda and the burying of a tree on top of someone's grave was such a spiritual relation shared between cultures that had no concept from our historical understanding of one another, but did quite similar things when it came to burials. The idea that the tree grows and you inhabit the tree, and this kind of thing that I touched on earlier when I was talking about the importance of the crossroads. Look like we're gonna just want to show that picture one more time. The symbolical nature of this fountain. It's a representation of our realm. Mount Marrow at the center. The four pillars, blah 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 blah, right? But yeah, um, man, there was like one more. An Arctic ice cave. Same thing. This touches on what I mentioned with my Kentucky article about the frozen ocean found 1,200 feet below Kentucky. This is quite interesting as well. Same narrative, right? They found a cave that is frozen. There's one in Oregon they found as well. These frozen ice caves that extend. They never find the end of them, and because the people freeze to death. I mean, you can't even explore these caves. They dress accordingly, and they explore the one in Oregon, and that's in my anomalous Oregon episode. But they find all kinds of really old um, representations of ships, and they dignify them as Phoenicians visiting the coasts of Oregon. Anyways, I think that's where we're going to wrap it up, because I just got large ones left, many by the mounds. This is about before Congress stepped in. The government was selling these mounds to private hands, and they were just being ransacked, or they were being turned into kind of like amusement parks. I did a few talks about this with Dr. Longo, World Florida, where we talk about mounds and golf, and how many golf courses were built in and around these kind of sacred places, mounds being included, and how the terminology became part of the golf game. Mentioning as well early on when I talked about how it's amazing how this courthouse or capitol building resembles a basketball court to me, very much so. And where that extends from, these ancients and sports and solving quarrels and things on the court. Leave it on the court. But yeah, um, glad I could get this knocked out, and I had some time tonight to finish it. And Thanks for sticking with me there through the kind of ramblings there in the last half hour or so. Hope you enjoyed the material as always. Do a quick little run through here. I think we got up to close to like 180, so it's pretty amazing considering how much time I've taken off. I wanted to thank David again for becoming a member, and Jose for your $5 sticker, and Jen. Really appreciate it. Means a lot. Robert, thanks for being here. Lucy Rose sticking it out the whole time. Bud sticking it out. I know that these long-winded reads can be hard for some people. I totally get it. So seeing some of you from start to finish, it really means a lot. Jen, thank you. Not really here. Danico, as always, regular faces. Sherry, thanks for sticking it out. Probably what my only wrench hanging out. Appreciate it. Next week is Ohio. Been excited for Ohio. Probably second or third on the list of most material I have. And we'll be able to go down some really interesting rabbit holes with Ohio. So really looking forward to that. What else? JJ Organics. So good to see you too. I have a nice reading voice. Well, thank you. Not everyone feels that way. It can be kind of boring, I think, when I'm doing these long-winded ones. Elon Musk's Boring Company. Yeah, I've talked a lot about that in the past. And I've read some really interesting ones about when they were first exploring the subway systems, not first exploring, uncovering, quote unquote, the subway systems of large cities like Chicago and New York, that they kept running into tunnels that they didn't know they were there. You think if you were the state or the city in charge of these developments, you would know where your own tunnels are, but they certainly did not. And the same was the story in London. They ran into tunnels that had been abandoned over and over and over. And just goes to show you that the history of even just something as silly as a subway is they don't even know what they're talking about. So yeah. Anyways, wrapping it up. Old World Micmac, Brett. Love you guys. As always, thanks for being here. Make sure to leave a comment. Next week is Ohio. I will be reading comments I'm going to make a more poignant effort to go through comments for this video and touch on maybe things that I missed or misinterpreted, as well as looking for people sharing information about, the places that they live or have visited, or interesting things they know about what's coming up next. So like I said, Ohio next week, episode 19. Can't believe we're this far in. Yeah, appreciate you guys all very much, and enjoy the rest of your Thursday night. Love you all. Bye, guys.